coming, everyone. My name is Yuna. I'm very sorry about the delay. This is very unexpected. We're trying to have Skype work here, but it's not working together somehow, so we're going to have a laptop here. We have a guest speaker on Skype watching all of you. Yes, and she will be presenting as well. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction of our speaker today, Dr. Crosby. First of all, my name is Yuna. I'm the editor of the web journal, TESOL Web Journal, and we host brown bag lectures every semester. This is our spring semester lecture. Thank you so much for coming. I know you're all busy. We're getting very close to finals. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Dr. Crosby. Dr. Crosby is a lecturer in our program, in the TESOL program at Teachers College. And before coming to Teachers College, she was an associate professor at Westchester University in Pennsylvania. And also she was an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati. She has a PhD from Ohio State University in second and foreign language education. And her research interests and her specializations include teacher preparation, technology.
Yes, they're very calm, right?
Community engagement and also academic literacies. She's published in referred journals, and she's also presented at national, local, state, international conferences. She's written book chapters. She's been awarded grants at the state, local, again, national levels. And also, currently, she's in the stage of finishing her co-edited books, 2 of them. I don't really know the titles, so I apologize.
Service learning, community engagement across multiple educational contexts in the 21st century.
Yes, those are the titles. And it's a pleasure to have her, it's an honor to have her today to speak for us. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Crosby.
So thank you so much for your patience. We're on South American time today. You didn't see that in the program. And I'm still trying to pull up the PowerPoint and all the technology shuffle here. As I'm doing that, my co-presenter via Skype, Deb, you can hear us. Oh, fantastic. Why don't you, can you all hear her?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead, can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Because she played a very big part and a fantastic, significant role in the research and the practice that we're going to be talking about today. So can I turn it over to you to introduce yourself? Thanks, Deb.
My name is Deb Uzi. I have a master's in TESOL from Westchester University. I have a position this year as the coordinator of multilingual student programs at Penn State Brandywine. We're a branch campus south of Philadelphia, a suburban campus with about 1,500 students. In my position now, I work a lot with both immigrant and international students. We've had immigrant students on our campus for a long, long time. We're starting to get an influx of international students as colleges across the country are. So I kind of have a dual role now where I help with visas and I help with student engagement, activities, and all that kind of stuff, as well as co-coordinate our multilingual student course cluster, which works with our students who still really need a lot of support in reading and writing as they take college classes. A lot of these students are immigrant students that graduated from American high schools. More of them are also international students. We've published quite a bit. I've published quite a bit on this group of students that we work with, including a book on teaching developmental immigrant students in undergraduate programs that I co-authored with a colleague at Penn State Brandywine. I don't know if our PowerPoint's up yet, but that's the gist.
Yeah, it's almost there.
I've worked in the multilingual student course cluster for about 14 years now, and what we do is we provide the students with a course in American history and culture. We give them a course in a basic writing course. This is all freshman semester. We pair it with a writing tutorial, which is fantastic. So they take a 1-credit writing tutorial along with our writing course. We also have a grammar for writing course that many of them take. We have a reading and study skill course many of them take, and then they take whatever math. That's their fall. And then in the spring they take me again, most of them do, for freshman composition. And then also several of them take me for comparative international literature and film course, which is a really great way to do a lot of reading and writing skills with students.
Okay, so we've done introductions. Thanks, Deb. So, the justification for our work here. First of all, Deb and I wanted to know who's in our audience to begin with, because we wanted to hopefully have each of you go away with just a little bit. So how many of you identify as practitioners? Can we see a show of hands?
Yeah.
Practitioners?
Very dark hands over there.
Okay. Maybe I should hold you up.
No,
so
I can see it.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right.
That's great.
And how many of you position yourself or identify as researchers? Okay. And both?
Multiple identities.
Okay, and it's okay to have multiple identities in this room. We often do. How many of you would identify otherwise? Not practitioner, not researcher? Nothing? Okay. Well, we need to start off by saying we're not going to answer all your questions about writing feedback. All right, so if you came and we're hoping that we would, have all the answers for you, that's not our goal today. We just want to share with you a project that we carried out and actually have published, in the third book that's been put out by Marc Roberge and his colleagues, who do a lot of work with a term that it has been used, but we've transferred to the term U.S. educated multilingual, multicultural learners. They're working out in California, but this applies to us and across the state. So I'll pass this book around if you're interested, and I did bring the others, our chapters in there, and it's a description of the work that that we've done about how to get more insight into feedback that we give our students. Because as practitioners and even as researchers, we think, oh, we need to be giving feedback, right? Because that's what we're paid to do. That makes us feel like a teacher. And I.C. Lee in 2013 says here, though, little is known about what happens when we respond to errors, okay? With our multilingual writers. Hence, we need to make that public. And that's what our goal, Deb and our other colleague, Myra, who's now retired, and where is she? Outer Banks?
Hilton Head,
yeah. Right. And didn't invite us to come along, so here we are, the two of us still presenting and working. So, but making this more public, okay? So that was our goal, all right? So an overview of our study was cross-institutional. This doesn't mean that you have to do this, but we did. Deb mentioned she's at Penn State Brandywine, which is in Media outside of Philly, and I was at Westchester, which is also outside of Philly. Deb was working with her first-year undergraduate multilingual writers, and I was working with MAT SOL teacher candidates in a reading-writing course, how to teach reading and writing. And the only reason we did a cross-institutional is because we didn't have multilingual writers at Westchester, and you all don't have teacher candidates at Penn State Brandywine. Okay, so there isn't necessarily, again, not necessarily a need to do cross-institutional, but that's what we did. Okay, so Deb.
Okay, so just to give you a little understanding of the multilingual student writers that I worked with that semester, they were all part of this multilingual student course cluster. Actually, 9 of the 10 actually had been in my basic writing class in the fall, and then I did the study in the spring, so most students did know me and how I give feedback, that kind of thing. They had kind of mismatched expectations going into college, because the students that we choose for this cluster are the ones whose verbal SAT is usually below 420, sometimes 450 if we interview them and we know that they're in a linguistic enclave or they're not really using a lot of English outside of school. But they usually they might have a 3.0 or 3.5 GPA in high school. So they kind of don't know what they don't know. And there's such a linguistic leap when you move into academic writing, academic reading and writing, that's why we put them in the cluster. These students really do need to see themselves as part of a campus community. A lot of them are first generation American college students. so they don't really, or they don't really feel like they fit in. And so that's part of what we do is to get them to see themselves as students, see themselves as belonging, and also both they and sometimes their instructors view them with a deficit lens, whereas you think about what's wrong with them instead of you're lacking English instead of thinking, you are multilingual, you have so much to contribute to this campus, to this university, you have so many outside perspectives that monolingual students don't have. You've seen the world, you know stuff. So that's kind of some of the goals that we have in the course cluster. They do take the 1 credit writing tutorial, which I think is important to note too, because there is a lot of criticism, there is a way of thinking that when your students' final drafts is not really the time to give written feedback because, they put it in their book bag and they never look at it again, so why did I spend all my time giving you feedback? But for these students, they are all they do have a writing tutor, and so I know they're going to go over that feedback, and as I'll explain in a minute, I also give them feedback all the way through the whole process. For this particular course, there were 10 multilingual students that agreed to participate in the study. There are more than that in the course. I want to say about 15 or so, but that's who decided to participate in the study. And you can see the breakdown of what country they're from. I found it interesting because it fluctuates from year to year. There were a lot of Spanish speakers that time, whereas now I have a lot of Chinese, a lot of students from Bangladesh, and it just varies as immigration and international students vary. 8 students will be from here, graduated from American high school. 2 of them were newly arrived one from Bangladesh in the fall, and another had just arrived he's a medical student from Ghana, had just arrived.
Okay, thanks, Seb. So I'll talk about the graduate teacher candidates that I was working with. Just a bit of a rationale. There is a need for experience responding to multilingual writers from the literature. The challenge in gaining hands-on experience is one of the rationales that I used for our participation in the project. And then the findings from Faris and Faris et al. That their experience is usually limited to addressing local issues in student writing, and this comes from very recent research, 2015, these 2 articles, that there's a mismatch. Teachers know, candidates know that I know what I should do. I should respond to global errors, the more macro issues first, structure, organization, content development, but what do I actually do? Both of these articles, the work done in them show I'm responding to those micro errors. Oh, article misuse, preposition misuse, okay, those kinds of errors. So there is that mismatch between the theory and the practice. I know what I should do, but what am I actually doing? There's a total mismatch, okay? So those were some of the other rationales behind why we participated in this. So here were my candidates, okay? Westchester University outside of Philly is, Deb, what would you say? You did your master's there. 15,000 students?
I have no idea. I know parking was difficult. So that probably go right.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it was like 15,000, maybe 14,000.
Right. As including the undergrad and all that, obviously.
Yeah, including the undergrad as well. That's not, undergrad and graduate. And in the course that I was teaching, like I said, it was a course on teaching reading and writing. There were only 10 teacher candidates, and they were working on their MAT Sol. They were a combination of what we call pre- and in-service teachers. So some had never been in the classroom, or and some were already working full-time in a K-12 ESL classroom, and in a content area classroom. Some were hoping to go overseas to teach, or stay here and work in a more adult education class. The native speaking teacher candidates were 8 out of the 10, and then we had 2 non-native English speaking teacher candidates. So that's just kind of a breakdown. I didn't put this up here, but there was 1 EFL, 1 adult ed, and then the rest were the K-12 teachers. Okay, so that's what the breakdown there looked like. All right, so just a little bit more about that course. Goals were to improve academic writing instruction of teacher candidates. The topics we covered, in addition to others, were teacher response to, accuracy in, and classroom approaches to student writing, providing feedback on local and global issues, dispersive feedback, frequency counts in writing, writing tutorials, implementing portfolio assessment. Again, the course was more than just this, but this was specifically related to writing as it pertained to the project we were working on with Deb's class, okay? All right, now, the collaborative curricular design of our project. Deb, do you want to talk about that? Or you want me to talk about
I'm picturing the next slide to talk about really with it. Basically, I'm trying to think where to start. We gave them, the students became pen pals with each other, basically. And it really enhanced, it was difficult to coordinate because, their class was, what was it, one night a week, and ours was more like a Monday or something, and ours was Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
So, we had a lot of back and forth, but it was a really neat way that the students really got insight into each other. And it was just that we used pseudonyms just because we wanted to have a little privacy because we weren't sure at first how we were going to do the study, so we wanted to keep it anonymous. And like one student called himself Mike, so then his pen pal, teacher candidate, called himself Ike. And we had Clark Kent, and we had, Superman, and we had all kinds of things like that where they really did kind of form a relationship.
Yeah. Thanks, Deb. So here is the flow chart, and wasn't it your husband who put this together for us? I thought he did a
science degree a lot on that.
Yeah, he did a fantastic
There
job.
was a lot of flow back and forth.
So you can see here in the chart a little bit better, because it was a little bit of a complicated process, as Deb's pointed out in what she's just said. But we started with her multilingual students in the project, where they wrote an introductory letter to the candidates, okay? Just telling them about themselves, where they were from. Deb, do you remember other things? I think I have.
How they felt about writing, how long they've been writing in English, what other languages they knew, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I have the samples with me. I'll just pass them around. The top one is the letter from the student, and the one it's attached to is the letter from the candidate in response to that. So you can see that I read the letters to the candidates, and then they chose a partner, and then they, as Deb pointed out, they assigned, they chose pseudonyms. So Mike and I, Perry White and
Clark Kent.
Clark Kent, that's right.
Was it Perry White? No.
Clark Kent.
Okay.
Yeah. So then after choosing partners, Deb's students wrote a first draft of the first essay that they sent to the candidates. And they did 3 essays: a classification essay, Deb help me, definition, I have this on the next slide, and argument. And Deb emailed the drafts and the writing assignment sheet to me. The candidates read over those, they wrote responses, and then they were scanned and emailed to Deb. And then that process was, like I said, they did 2 other essays, so that process was completed for those. And then students read the feedback and evaluated it on a form, used the feedback in their revisions. Debbie gave marks on the final drafts and sent the scanned copies of the graded drafts and the feedback response forms to me in order for me to give that to my students, to the teacher candidates. Okay, so did I miss anything, Deb?
No, I think you got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so all of that was done for the 3 essays that we focused on, because I think they did a total of 5 essays for your class, right?
Yes, of course.
But we only did this process for 3.
Okay, so on the next one?
Yeah, on the next slide.
Okay, so basically, to prepare these multilingual students for the feedback they were getting, I let the students know that these are teacher candidates who are learning to become teachers. They're learning to provide feedback. And so they were really curious about what kind of feedback these teachers might give. They liked the idea of an outside audience. It really made it a little bit more real to them. They had an extended audience. And So they were used to my feedback, and what was interesting is they were giving feedback on feedback. But what was good about that is they felt like experts. They knew something these teacher candidates didn't know. They were able to kind of say, this works for me, this doesn't work for me, that kind of thing. So on the next slide, I give feedback throughout the process with writing. All my writing assignments there are multiple steps. So, I'm giving them informal feedback. I'm circulating on the classroom every time, looking at drafts as they're working on drafts. I'm talking about ideas, that kind of thing. So they get a lot of feedback from me besides the written feedback they get on a final draft. I really try when I give my feedback to kind of give my thoughts as a reader, what a reader would be thinking, because one way I explain it to students is that, they're all pretty comfortable talking, and in a conversation, people ask you questions and then you answer them and you expand and all that, but the reader-writer conversation is very different in that the writer has to anticipate what the reader might be asking and provide it already. So when that hasn't been anticipated, I'll put a little question and ask about a detail, or say, this sentence doesn't seem to, how does that connect to the sentence before? Those kind of, that kind of feedback, that kind of more, the reader's thoughts kind of feedback. A lot of my students too have, they think all their writing problems are grammar based, or some of them aren't used to getting feedback on content and organization, so I really do make sure that is feedback that they get, that they realize that is a huge piece of college writing. I use coded comments for the grammar issues, so I might just write S/V for subject-verb agreement, and we've gone over these, they know what that means. So I'll identify the type of error, and then it's up to them to go back and actually fix it. So I'm not writing a fix on their paper, I'm giving them a code, and then I get them to think about, okay, what are the two or three most common types of errors that I make? Because a lot of students just say, well, I'm bad at grammar. Well, that doesn't help very much. What part of grammar is tough for you? What part are you good at? So if they can kind of keep track of their errors, keep some kind of even an internal error log, if not one written down, that helps them there. But then there are some things where you have to write a choice. For example, one thing students do all the time, although I was tired, I still went to school. So they'll use although and but together. That's a very common one. So I might circle both of them and write pick one. Or if there's a set expression like that really is an idiom, I'll just write out what is something that's so out there. But generally, that's the type of comments that I do put on there.
Okay, thanks, Deb. So as far as writing feedback of my candidates, the 10 that I was working with, in a pre-project questionnaire that I gave them, do you provide writing feedback? 5 out of my 10 students said that they did. It was based primarily on their own writing experience, that there was value in feedback on syntactic issues. It was a means of testing students' comprehension of content. They utilized rubrics, okay, and writing conferences to provide feedback. I thought it was interesting that one student said maybe, because at that point in her graduate study, she had encountered, if you're familiar with the big debate between Ferris 99 and Truscott 1996, and then I think somebody else has joined the argument of, and it's still a big debate in the field, whether or not providing feedback is effective. Okay, we still can't decide the effectiveness of it. So that's where the student was in the process of, I just don't know if I, provide writing feedback. So that's where she was. And then there was no answer from 4 of them, and I'm not sure how to interpret that. Okay, but it was what it was. Okay, so. All right, so as we mentioned, there were 3 essays, classification, definition, and argument, that we did for this project, 2 drafts of each. The first drafts and the assignment descriptions were distributed to the teacher candidates for their response, okay, which we showed you in that flow chart. And then the teacher candidates were given feedback from essentially 3 sources, okay? From myself, from the paper writers, Deb's students, and then from Deb herself. Okay. But did you have anything to add to that? No? Okay. So, all right, this is a little bit difficult to see, but this is the assignment description for one of the essays, the argument essay. Deb, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide what to condense and what not to, given our limited time. But basically, I give them a lot of, I try to break it into parts for the students so they see writing as a process. I do use graphic organizers, that kind of thing with them. But this basically, tells them exactly what needs to be. It's little for me to read on this one too, but that they do need both, they need the clear thesis statement that has a mapping sentence to it, that they need main points, they need a counter argument, all that kind of stuff. This is all included in there. So they know what's expected. And then the next slide just kind of has the beginning of a graphic organizer they can use if they want to kind of get themselves started. I provide a lot of different types of graphic organizers to get them thinking.
So for the argument essay, did you just have them choose their own topic, Deb? Remind me.
Yeah, actually in that class, sometimes in the basic writing course, I pair it with another class that the reading study skills course where they're doing debates, and so they have them then write on their debate topic, so it really makes it richer for them. But in this course, I did have them choose their own topic, and we had lots of lists and brainstorming sessions. I really feel strongly about letting students choose their own topic, to get something that they feel like they're interested in. I do, for this semester, for example, we did a campus read, but it was on garbology, but then we narrowed it down and let them pick some aspect of it that they liked. So I always give lots of choices. In this case, they had pretty much free reign.
Okay, so I have to ask, what is garbology?
Garbology is the study of garbage. It's a book that the whole campus has read, and it's basically the environmental impact of our garbage and our consumption and that kind of thing. So students have done everything from research on K-cups and plastic bags and plastic bottles and food waste and all kinds. Learned about ugly fruit and all kinds of fun stuff. So
Wow.
a lot of good topics.
Yeah, a lot of good topics. All right, thanks, Deb. All right, so so the teacher candidates were provided with the assignment description and the heuristic or graphic organizer that Deb provided her students, and a list of guiding questions for them providing feedback. Because an argument essay can be difficult for students to write. It can also be difficult for us to understand as a genre. Okay, and so that doesn't look very clear. So let me I'll point out a couple of these questions, just as so you can see what I was trying to help my teacher candidates understand about this particular genre, and helping them to look for as they were reading and then giving feedback. Is there a clearly stated and well-directed argument in the paper in the form of a thesis statement? Okay, and of course this was me also understanding Deb's understanding of an argument, what her expectations were for her students, and basing that on the documents that she provided. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The one thing that we didn't provide here is that I do give them a checklist for their own essay to kind of like a revision and editing checklist. So they are also given kind of guided questions like that for themselves.
Okay. So Deb, can you say just a little bit more about that checklist?
I have a clear, an engaging introduction that either goes broad to narrow, that explains the topic, or that explains the issue, or maybe or another choice would be that or that I have a common experience that relates to the issue. I have a clear thesis statement, just different things about the support. My conclusion does this, that kind of stuff.
Okay, great, thanks, Deb. So just a couple others. Support is based on their own opinion for a lot of writers, especially when they're in their beginning semester or beginning year or years at the university, thinking that my opinion is relevant and that will work as support, but Academic writing is very objective. So number 2 was, is there evidence that writers have consulted outside sources to support their argument? And then number 3 here is it adequate, or are there gaps? Okay, and there's more here, but hopefully that gives you a flavor for how the teacher candidates were guided in reviewing this. Did you want to say more, Deb?
That's kind of similar to everything that we put in the class, so it is reiterating,
Good, I'm glad we were on the same page.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah.
Especially since it was published. Okay, so here's, next slide, here's the instrument that I use. I'll call it an instrument, but just a questionnaire, more or less, to find out from my teachers what they were thinking with regard to the feedback experience. Question number 1, describe your experience providing feedback. Was it easy? If so, what made it so? And for each of the essays, this one was just for the argument essay, but they got this for all 3. Okay, so after doing this for all 3 essays, they were to fill out this questionnaire to reflect. What was their experience like? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Explain that. Did they feel confident about providing feedback? Okay?
The students got a similar questionnaire when they gave feedback on feedback, and the first one was, how did you feel when you received that feedback? Because sometimes, teachers need to couch things sometimes. They don't want to, how do you word it? So how did you feel about it? What was helpful? Why? What was not helpful? Why? What suggestions do you have for the teacher candidate, to give feedback in the future?
Yeah.
It was very hard to get them to say anything wasn't helpful because they wanted feedback,
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Deb.
Yeah.
That's great to know.
Although one student did comment students kind of got a little bit of their own autonomy there. One student kind of rejected some feedback. They said, well, no, that changes the meaning of what I want to say. And so they were critical of the feedback, which was helpful.
Yeah, but that highlights students being critical thinkers.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And
that's
what
I was looking for. One of them, they felt a little bit more like an expert, a little bit more self-assured, a little more self-efficacy, that I know what I need to become a better writer, and I can make choices. So, and I can reject, I don't have to just do what this person says. I have to think about how that really works for what I want to say.
Great. Thanks, Deb. So, and then after receiving the feedback on their feedback, the teacher candidates, they received another questionnaire that said to read over the instructor's feedback and final evaluation on the student's paper. So they received the final draft with Deb's comments on it. It included the final grade, and then they were to reflect on that. Is it similar to what you gave your writing partner? Okay. If so, how? If not, how is it different? And then what did you learn about responding to and evaluating? Okay. So again, they did this for all 3 essays. Right. So, all right. These were just very briefly, some of the preliminary findings from evaluating their comments on these questionnaires, in looking over the feedback that they gave on the 3 essays, in doing think alouds with them, and as well as interviewing them. And again, this is just preliminary. This is not published. Okay. So with regard to the classification essay, the candidates felt relatively confident about this genre in comparison to the other 2, I should say. The definition, and especially in regard to the argument essay. All right. They found the argument one to be very challenging to give feedback on. Some of you are smiling. But they didn't know which feedback technique to use, but didn't explain that. They just were kind of like, And my speculation is that it was because this was the first one that they were doing. Because when we get to the comments for the next one, we'll see that they felt more confident. Okay. They felt confident in providing feedback overall, but only at the micro level. All right. Not surprising, really. candidates lack confidence in providing feedback because of being unclear about assignment expectations and grading criteria. Again, I think that's because this was the first essay, getting familiar with Deb. Who Deb is the teacher. You're a great teacher, Deb. You know, what her expectations are, you know, what she's looking for as a grader, okay, for her students, who the students are, who their writing partners are, that is, okay. And then something interesting they commented on was the digital feedback was more preferred, or most preferred was written. They found that to be more personal. The digital feedback, like using track changes, so to speak, in Word, they didn't.
You know, and just to add to that, I found years ago that, you know, I don't use a red pen. I find that very, you know, upsetting to a student. I mean, I've got blue, I've got green, I've got orange, you know, but I think that there is something to be said for those elements.
Okay. So with definition essay, the essay number 2, they felt more confident. They had more time to respond to the essays. With essay number 1, I think that one, just because of scheduling, they had to do it quickly. And this one, in light of the instructor's feedback, you know, they were getting the gist of it. So this one was a little bit more easy for them to raise their confidence level, okay? Now, as far as shadowing, you know, this whole process of shadowing the Deb, here were some of the comments. They found that from prior feedback from the instructor, when they noticed that the corrections were similar to theirs, that increased their confidence, okay? And the instructor mentioned in her comments that the editing suggestions made by the teacher candidates were good ones. That was nice to hear, okay? So again, confidence was increased. Seeing what I assume are the course instructor's comments lets me know I'm on the right track, all right? So again, going back to I.C. Lee's comment, you know, making our feedback public and just kind of calibrating with each other, so to speak, is boosting our confidence here. So shifting from the local to the global, shadowing the instructor provided considerable guidance on how to focus on the more important aspects of writing. All right, so moving from the practice to the theoretical. I know I should focus on the global. So Deb was helping her with doing that, okay? And not getting so overly focused on grammar and usage that are likely to be an issue. With the argument essay, these were some preliminary findings. Candidates lacked confidence because they didn't know their writing partners, and the genre. Okay, again, they found that to be the most difficult of the 3. But in general, felt more confident, and that might have just been with the practice. This was the 3rd essay. Okay. So what they learned, they gained experience with various academic genres. They learned to anticipate specific difficulties such as rhetorical and linguistic difficulties of multilingual writers and academic genres. Okay, so they learned about classification, definition, argument, especially going back to that those guiding questions for the argument essay, to identify specific writing needs of multilingual writers, and then they increase their knowledge of their own academic writing and pedagogy. And some pedagogical implications, just very quickly. You know, opportunities to provide feedback in class, between classrooms, across institutions, virtually. You know, making assignment expectations clear. What are the candidates responding on and to? Helping teacher candidates understand that the writing genre they're providing feedback on. Okay. Providing clear, you know, grading rubrics that reflect expectations, or have them create one as part of the assignment. Okay. Know what you already know, what assumptions are you making about your students as writers, what do you still need to know about them. That will help you to provide feedback and allow time, to give effective feedback.
That was our biggest challenge.
That's always the biggest challenge, so trying to be creative about that. Okay, Deb?
Okay, so just some of the outcomes that I saw with my multilingual students. First of all, because they got feedback from so many people and from so many sources, so many different parts of the process, from me, from the writing tutor, the peers, teaching candidates. We couldn't draw a direct cause-effect line, but I did do some questionnaires and surveys with the students, and they really did perceive improvement and felt motivated. They said of having an outside audience, like the teacher candidate, felt that they needed to push themselves even more than regular, is how it was worded. But also the biggest surprise, I didn't predict this, but what came out, I think, is that the greatest result for my students was seeing themselves as experts. That they were able to say, yes, this feedback is helpful. No, this isn't. That changes the meaning of what I want to say, or that didn't help me as much as something else. And just become a little bit more self-assured was a huge thing, and that they felt like they were helping the teachers was huge, and that they were participating in a research study as freshmen. They thought that was pretty amazing too. That they just felt like scholars in a way that they were, and that they were helping graduate students, which they just really got into. They became more comfortable and confident in evaluating feedback, accepting or rejecting it, which I said. Questionnaires showed more self-awareness, increased self-efficacy. They weren't all just said, and then 7 of the 9, because one student did drop out of the study because of attendance issues, but 7 of the 9 that completed it named what they perceived to be their writing strengths and weaknesses, which they could not do at the beginning of their freshman year. So, I don't know how much of that was part of the entire process of freshman year all the way through to the end of freshman year. But they definitely could name specific grammar strengths and weaknesses, specific writing, organization, support, strengths and weaknesses. Okay, the other slide.
Deb, just a second, before you move on to the other slide, I just wanted to add one thing about that one. As far as like them being part of a research study, we want our students to be part of the university. Bartholomew, if you're familiar with his piece, Inventing the University, this is, what year, 70s, 80s? You'll have to look it up, Inventing the University.
I have it over here somewhere,
Yeah, but so it talks about how, not just with our multilingual writers, but our incoming freshmen, if you're teaching a freshman composition course, we have this expectation is that they have this understanding of what it means to be in academic writing in this context, and also in a K-12 context as well, even though we're teaching what academic literacy is, what academic writing is. And Christine Casanave in the field of TESOL has said no one is a native speaker of academic English, and I've said no one is a native writer of academic English. None of us are, no matter if we're a native speaker of English or a non-native speaker of English. All of us have had to learn, right, Deb? To, what academic English is. So, this was a fantastic way for these students to learn what it is to be part of the academic community, and for them to be, multilingual, multicultural learners. To bring them in this way is a great opportunity for them.
And that we're all still learning, and that these teacher candidates were still learning.
Yes.
We could all learn from each other. The learning community is what we really want to engage them in.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Deb. Next slide.
Okay. They really did. It was amazing how much they look forward to receiving feedback from their partners. And again, it just put them part of a broader community practice. They had another audience besides me and the other students in the class to write for, and that they really seemed to be powerful for them. Some of the quotes that I had from the students: my helper went to my native country before, so it helped her see all the areas I need help on the most, and I learned that she understood me, so she really felt understood. All 9 said it was a positive experience, and 7 of the 9 specifically noted they found having an outside reader's perspective to be helpful and motivating. I think it's a great way to get another feedback from a different person who has different ideas. They all really wanted to meet the partners in person, and we were doing it as kind of a blind study, but in the future that would be a fantastic way, a party before, after, during, some kind of meeting up. It would have been a logistical challenge, but I think it would have been really good for them.
Yeah, I think we had talked about maybe having a pizza party afterward, like after the IRB approval had run out.
IRB to worry about,
Yeah, so that we could, have them meet in person, for all of us to get together and just to talk about the experience face to face and what a rich experience that would be. Okay, so next slide. Oh.
References. Yep.
Okay, so there's our references. And I think, do we have time for?
About 11 minutes.
Oh, we have 11 minutes for.
Wow, I didn't expect that. Good.
So thank you for listening and attending and your patience with the technological difficulties. And there's our email addresses and yeah.
But just any questions?
So we'll have a few
they were
minutes of Q&A.
I saw it. I heard them.
They were clapping, Deb, so. Okay.
There you are.
Oh, you can see people now.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Any questions?
I had a question.
Yeah.
On one of the slides, it mentioned that there are different feedback techniques. What would those be? Like, was that like written feedback, oral, giving someone feedback?
So let's go back to that slide.
It was towards the beginning.
It's like around 11 or so, was it? Or no?
Yeah, let's go back to
11-ish. Might have switched when you added things.
Oh, okay. Let me know when I'm close.
It's right after the big chart my husband made.
Okay. Types of feedback given? Is that
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Different feedback techniques is what I had written down.
Okay.
Because when the student says they're not confident, you don't know.
Was it the multilingual writers or the teacher candidates? This one?
Yeah, didn't know which feedback technique to use. So
Okay.
what are the feedback techniques?
Which one are we talking about?
So we're talking about the teacher candidates.
Oh, okay.
So-
Not the ones that I gave, but what the teacher candidates weren't sure about giving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so when they were given the first essay, at that point they had been, they had read about the different types of techniques. We were using Ferris and Hedgecock's book on teaching, now I'm blanking on the name. Teaching L2 composition, purpose, process, and Amazon.com. I'm currently using it in a second language writing class.
I got it right here, right here. I got
Oh.
it. It's teaching ESL composition, purpose, process, and practice.
Thank you,
Yep.
Deb. So they have a chapter in there on the different techniques that can be used for giving feedback. So the direct way, right,
Okay.
that many of us use, particularly with our beginning writers, where we go through and much like what Deb talked about, maybe use a list of,
Got it, like
codes, yeah. But they also talk about if we have writers that are more advanced, where instead of pointing it explicitly, using explicit feedback, just highlighting what the errors are, maybe with an underline or a circle,
leaving it to the writer.
and leaving it to the writer, okay?
Yeah. I found with my level of
Yeah.
students that the coded comments worked the best because I wasn't writing the correct verb form in there. I was just writing that there was a verb form error in that line, and then they would go back and find it and fix it. And I do say having the tutors is helpful. That besides they can come to me and talk about it, they can come to the tutor about it. But it lets them try to correct it themselves first. I just identify the type.
And did your students happen to mention if
But
they-
that's for the grammatical errors. But then there's plenty of feedback that's content driven and logic driven that I give too.
I wonder if the students like that kind of feedback. Did they mention if they have a preference for, do they like figuring it out on their own, or would they rather the teacher tell them precisely what needs to be fixed?
Can you hear?
Do they like? They like the codes. I mean, they do like the codes better than if I just underlined it and said, "Hey, there's something in here."
Okay.
Go find it.
Figure it out.
Which is a strategy, as some teachers do, and I've seen it when non-ESL teachers do that in our campus. They just underline it with no explanation of what's wrong. So I do give them the code, and they like that. I mean, I try to tell them that I'm not just gonna write and change it for them because that's not helping them to think it through. So so I don't know. Yeah.
One other thing I want to say in response to these feedback techniques, it's also this issue of the macro versus the micro.
Yeah, focusing a lot on more of the micro.
So if they're going to, the teachers were like, well, if I'm going to approach the macro, then how do I do that? Because, you know, we're talking about the micro issues here and the list of codes, and even if we underline rather than, like Deb's saying, and, you know, I know something's there, or circle, but how do we approach giving, this is what my teacher candidates were saying, well, how do I approach providing that feedback for these macro issues? Is it marginal comments? And if so, what do those look like? You know, what do they sound like? You know, I remember going back to my English, they were saying to me, I remember going back to my English classes when I was in high school and just getting the AWK written across the top. Not, you know, this wasn't with, Nancy's saying, you know, she's waving her head like, no. Or like the see me, and you're just like dread, you know, that effective filter's going up, right? You're like, what did I do? Like, you know, it wasn't that bad. So that's really what, you know, they were pointing out here is like, you're telling me the theory says that I should approach the macro, right, first. Because if they don't have organization in place, it makes no difference that we're addressing issues of, you know, tense, or like you said, Deb, verb form, or, you know, if we wanted to address like the big ones, right, article usage, preposition, whatever it is according to our, you know, curriculum, lesson objectives, what have you. Yeah, so that's more or less what it is. Yeah, Deb, you want to say something?
Well, one thing with that thing, with instead of writing awkward or something like that, I tend to say, you know, I'm not sure what you mean here. I think the best thing that I've found with that kind of thing is just to say, can you explain to me in your own words what you're trying to say here? And then most of the time, it's very clear when they say it out loud again. You know, somehow there's something that's lost. So if you just say, you know, could you know, explain to me what you mean here? Okay, why don't you write that? You know, that has tend to help with a lot of the awkward kind of things. You know, and I have been known not, well, I guess I'm going on micro level again, but if you know, if there's a shift in verb tense or shift to something, I might just note that in a section. I'm not going to underline every single verb and all that for them now.
Nancy, I think I saw your hand first.
Well, I've done a lot of the coding and all of that, but I never had a tutor. I think the key thing is having a tutor go through, because my students in general did not know how to make the change. They didn't know. So for me to write the codes is kind of an exercise in writing codes on my part and just kind of having fun with that. I know, you know, WW, WV, VT, verb 10. I mean, I had all these things, and you have to collect them all the time and look at them again. And if you're teaching 5 classes,
right, that's a lot.
You can't do it. You can't keep up. So I'm just thinking of the practicality and the idea of having a tutor, which is great. And I think that's the way to go, because it's so hard to find the time and to have them actually make the change and figure out what it is. Because they get super frustrated when they get these things back and they're unable to, or WW, wrong word. I mean,
I need to have a conversation after it. Yeah, you can't just say the wrong
but you've
word.
got, you know, multiplied by 20.
Negotiate, what is that word? Yeah,
Multiplied by however many comments in a thing. So I like the tutor idea. That's the way to go.
Thanks, Nancy. What's your name?
Marin.
Okay.
So I was wondering, this is kind of connected to your question about what they preferred in terms of, or what they responded to most, those local or the global issues. And I mean, I think, because I think the code is like something, sometimes if you know what the code is, it's easier to decipher, where if you just say, sometimes the global issues, it really is an issue of logic or an issue of lack of evidence, and then it requires a lot more revision in a certain sense. So that, I wonder how the students responded to those different comments from the MAT SOL students, if they expressed a preference, or in their feedback to those students, if they had.
Well, you want me to get that?
Yeah, it sounds like you're asking about multilingual
I
writers.
do, we didn't show it, is I do use rubric, in a rubric in the class says, you know, your support is this many points, or your whatever, so your thesis is this many points. So there is some motivation there to pay attention to those type of issues in that way, like to pay attention to the feedback on the more global or argumentative sensitive issues that way because they know it is part of the grade, like grammar is maybe 20% of the whole thing. So that I do that on purpose to try to shift their focus away from that a little bit. You know, that's kind of the biggest way. I don't know if we I didn't directly look at at that question, which is a really good question when we were looking at that. Do you remember something from that, Kate?
I don't, but we have a lot of data that we haven't analyzed yet, so.
Yeah, because I mean, as somebody who's done a lot of teaching, writing, and ESL students, just wondering about that question, because the global issue thing always seems like something that I have to actually sit down with the student and have a conversation. That there's not a good way to put that on a piece of paper and have it be meaningful in any kind of way.
Yeah.
And that's my struggle.
And that's writing conferences, I do that too with them one-on-one. I mean, that's, sometimes you gotta cancel class and have a writing conference, and there's no, one answer. One thing I found helpful for them for checking their own kind of organization is to have them give each other what I kind of call elevator speeches. You know, like an elevator speech traditionally is like, if you're stuck on an elevator with the CEO of a company and you want the job, can you give bullet points in 20 seconds on why you get the job? So could you give an elevator speech on your paper? Like, this is what I'm going to talk about. These are my main points, how it's going to outline. So do you have that organization yet in your head? And doing a lot with graphic organizers and feedback on graphic organizers ahead of time, too, because there is nothing worse than having 3 to 5 pages of unorganized stuff handed to you. So the more you can do ahead of time to get them to, make a plan and map it out and discuss that with each other, I found that that's helpful in that way too. So they get the feedback almost earlier on some of that stuff before it gets to the draft. And then you're talking more about, your cohesion and your transitions and that kind of stuff and then the other big thing is, okay, I find a lot with their thesis statement, if they make their thesis a mapping sentence and kind of list their main points in the thesis statement, did they actually follow that list? You know what I mean? Is it in opposite order? Let's go check that, Or, color coding each thing sometimes. This is all my first point, this is all my second point, or numbering them so they kind of can see, oh my God, I have this much about point number 1 and this much about point number 2. So visuals and highlighting them online and stuff, I've done that. I'm just throwing out a lot of things I've tried. So.
Deb, do you want to talk about the book you and Myra put out? You wish,
okay.
just to plug for it, because it's a great book too, very practical.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we read a book it's called Teaching Developmental Immigrant Students in Undergraduate Programs, and it basically talks about our multilingual student course cluster, which I described to you, and kind of like what you could do, very practical in the classroom. What can you do for each in each area for the STEM student? And also, I guess first defines developmental immigrant student as a student that is either a first generation or sometimes even second generation student in an enclave that is, writing in English is not their native language, and they still have a lot of, they still have some developmental issues. They're lacking a lot of background knowledge and things like that. They're not quite ready for the academic language as well in the university. So what can you do to build that up in your classrooms? So it's a very kind of practical how-to kind of book.
Okay, thanks, Deb. I think we're out of time.
Okay, I had a commercial in, wow.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Thanks, Una.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for your
Thank you very much for coming
Deb.
and staying a little over time. I hope we can get some more
You
snacks.
did a great job.
And stay tuned for our next lecture. Thank you very much.
I'll email.